You're watching OPD.
Funding for local broadcast of the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by viewers like you and by the following. Stein Oil Company, fueling for businesses in Clackamas, Oregon City, Milwaukee, and Tualatin.
Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt, a Pacific Northwest law firm with offices in Oregon and Washington. Legal advisors for the future of your business.
Good evening, I'm Gwen Eiffel. Jim Lehrer is off. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Wednesday, then U.S. Marine Commandant Michael Hagee speaks out on investigations into civilian deaths in Iraq. Two other Marines react. We hear from retired Generals Joseph Hoare and Mike DeLong. The second in Paul Salmon's three-part series on the economics of global warming. Repealing the estate tax, two sides of the story. And Congress votes to increase the cost of crossing the line on the air.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
The world's demand for energy will never stop, which is why a farmer is growing corn, and a farmer is growing soy, and why ADM is turning these crops into biofuels. The world's demand for energy will never stop, which is why ADM will never stop. We're only getting started. ADM, resourceful by nature.
There's a company that builds more than 1 million vehicles a year in places called Indiana and Kentucky. One that has 10 plants, from the foothills of West Virginia to the Pacific coastline. What company is this? Toyota, a company that, along with its dealers and suppliers, has helped create hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs. A company proud to do its small part to add to the landscape of America.
And by Pacific Life, CIT, and the Atlantic Philanthropies, and...
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The U.S. Marine Commandant acknowledged today he's gravely concerned by reports of atrocities in Iraq. General Michael Hagee made his first public comments on allegations that Marines murdered civilians in Haditha. He confirmed he's seen photographs taken after the incident last November, but he gave no specifics. We will hear some of General Hagee's remarks and have more on Iraq right after this news summary. In Iraq, the government freed nearly 600 prisoners today, part of a plan, it said, for national reconciliation. The inmates were dropped off at a bus station in Baghdad. In all, 2,000 detainees will be released in the days ahead. Also today, Baghdad police said 15 people kidnapped from bus stations on Monday have been released. 35 others are still missing. And overnight, a car bomb killed 8 Shiites attending a wake in the city. 14 more people died in separate attacks today. Afghanistan's intelligence chief reported today more than 250 people were arrested in the Kabul riots last week. Violence erupted after a U.S. military truck was involved in a fatal crash. Nearly 20 people died and more than 120 were wounded. The Afghan official said gangs forced some people to join the riot. He would not elaborate. A European report today alleged 14 nations aided the CIA in secretly moving and holding terror suspects. An investigator for the Council of Europe, a human rights body, said there was a spider's web of abuses, although he provided no direct evidence. In London, British Prime Minister Blair rejected the findings.
We have said absolutely all we have to say on this. There is nothing more to add to it. And I have to say the Council of Europe report adds absolutely nothing new, whatever, to the information we have.
The United States had no direct response, but 2 other nations, Poland and Romania denied the allegations. The U.S. called today for Iran to freeze its uranium enrichment program throughout any nuclear talks. But State Department spokesman Sean McCormick would not discuss what comes after that. The Washington Post and others reported a U.S.-European offer would let Iran resume enrichment within its borders eventually. But first, it would have to prove it is not seeking nuclear weapons. The Veterans Affairs Department faced new outrage today over stolen personnel information. It turns out more than 2 million active duty personnel were affected. That's on top of 26 million veterans. Veterans groups condemned the new disclosure. House Democrats called for free credit monitoring for all affected. The Senate today rejected a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. Supporters needed 60 votes to end debate, but got only 49, just one vote better than the last time the subject reached the Senate floor in 2004. The amendment's backers had predicted a substantial gain, but South Dakota Republican John Thune said it's progress just the same.
We may get to where the states, 38 of the states have acted, and maybe by that time Congress will find its way to be able to act on this as well. But we've made a little headway each time this is debated. It's elevated. I think people focus more on it, and 48 votes 2 years ago would have been 50 votes, I guess, if everybody had been here today. But it seems to me, at least, that that's progress in the right direction in favor of protecting and defending traditional marriage.
Just yesterday, Alabama voters overwhelmingly approved a state ban on gay marriage. President Bush, who spoke on behalf of the federal amendment earlier this week, said today he was disappointed in the Senate vote. The House voted today to increase fines for coarse language and indecent behavior on the air by tenfold. The maximum penalty would rise to $325,000. The bill has already passed the Senate, and the president is expected to sign it into law. We'll have more on this story later in the program. Republicans narrowly won a closely watched House race on Tuesday. In San Diego, California, former Congressman Brian Bilbray ran just 4 points ahead of Democrat Francine Busby in a heavily Republican district. Also in California, State Treasurer Phil Angelides won the Democratic gubernatorial nomination. He'll face Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger in the fall. In Alabama, Republican Governor Bob Riley won renomination over former state Chief Judge Roy Moore. Moore was ousted for refusing to move a Ten Commandments monument from the state judicial building. Wall Street was hit with more losses today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell another 71 points to close below 10,931. It's down more than 300 points this week. The NASDAQ dropped nearly 11 points to close at 2151. That's it for the news summary tonight. Now, the Marine Corps Commandant faces the press. Generals Hoare and DeLong assess Iraq war strategy. Paul Salman on global warming, and congressional debate on the estate tax and punishing broadcast indecency. The U.S. Marines in Iraq, and to Margaret Warner.
For the first time since allegations surfaced of Marine atrocities in Iraq, the Commandant of the Marine Corps today publicly addressed the controversy. General Michael Hagee told reporters that until the investigations are complete, he couldn't comment directly on allegations that Marines murdered Iraqi civilians in 2 towns and then covered up what happened. But during a 14-minute Pentagon news conference, General Hagee did stress the importance of Marines living up to certain basic values.
Our recruits are taught, and it is constantly reinforced, that an important part of being a Marine is accomplishing the mission while adhering to our core values of honor, courage, and commitment. While Marines are proud of our high standards, they also know that if they violate these tenets, they will be held accountable. Without accountability, standards would be nothing more than goals. Where compliance with our standards is in question, we use well-established processes to determine as accurately and expeditiously as possible what happened and why. But make no mistake, a Marine who has been found to have violated our standards will be held accountable. It is an important part of who we are, and all Marines expect it. High standards and accountability define Marines. As Commandant, I am gravely concerned about the serious allegations concerning actions of some Marines at Haditha and Hamdaniya. I can assure you that the Marine Corps takes them seriously. We are committed to fully supporting the investigations of both incidents. We want to ensure the investigations are complete with respect to what actually happened on the ground and actions taken or not taken by the chain of command.
I'm wondering, given the gravity of what's come to light thus far in the two cases that you cited, why shouldn't you resign as an acknowledgement of failure of leadership?
I serve at the pleasure of the president, and I have not submitted any resignation. Jim?
General, Congressman Murtha said that the allegations of these reported incidents are a further sign that the Marines and soldiers in Iraq are under tremendous combat stress. Is that the case? If these allegations prove to be true, is that a contributing factor?
I visit Iraq about once every 2 months, and I can only report on what I have seen in my interaction with the Marines and with the soldiers over there. And I can tell you that their morale is really quite high. The operational tempo is also high. They are very proud in what they're doing. They know they're well equipped. They know they're well trained, and they know that they are making a difference.
And they know right from wrong, General.
They absolutely know right from wrong.
General, as far as I know, all that we have officially on the record from the military on the Haditha incident is that 15 civilians were killed by a roadside bomb. Can you now correct for the record that statement and tell us if that statement was inaccurate?
Jonathan, as I've said several times, I cannot comment on anything that has happened in either one of those two incidences until the investigations are complete.
I know when you were in Iraq, besides talking to the Marines, you were listening as well. What are they telling you about their thoughts on these allegations, what they're thinking about them, and how it may be impacting their ability to do their jobs?
First off, I would tell you that they are focused on what they're doing and focused on their mission. But I think the best way that I can capture the feeling over there is in Al-Assad, I believe it was, I had an NCO stood up and said, "Sir, that's not what we do. That's not what we're about." And he said, "I want to know what senior leadership is doing, and I want to know what we can do about that." And I told him what they could do about that is continue to do what they are doing right now. And they're doing really a magnificent job.
And for more now, we're joined by two retired Marine Corps generals with extensive experience dealing with Iraq and the wider Middle East. General Joseph Hoare was Commander-in-Chief of Central Command from 1991 to 94 in the immediate aftermath of the Gulf War. CENTCOM serves as headquarters for U.S. forces in Iraq. He's now a consultant for American and European companies doing business in the Middle East. And Lieutenant General Michael DeLong was Deputy Commander of Central Command from 2000 to 2003 during the first phase of the current Iraq War, working directly for General Tommy Franks. He's now with the Shaw Group, an engineering and construction company with extensive contracts in the Middle East. He's also the author of the book Inside CENTCOM. Welcome to you both, Generals. General Hoare, first, help us understand what we just saw with General Hagee. Why could he not, he kept saying he couldn't comment on the incidents. Why is he unable to, for instance, correct the record at the very least? Some in Congress have asked him to, of the official Marine account right after the Haditha incident, which was that 15 had died in a roadside bomb.
Margaret, the long-standing rule in dealing with investigations is the investigating officer is given the requirement to come up with all of the facts, derive opinions from that, and make a recommendation. And in a system which is very hierarchical, the top person, and then really any senior person, should refrain from either making judgments or suggestions until all of that is done. Because, for example, if someone were found guilty of a crime and afterward punished, someone might say, well, the Commandant of the Marine Corps exercised undue interest in this. He suggested that the number was X rather than Y. or the timing was different. It's just unfortunate because the result of all of this investigation will probably lead to disciplinary action of some type. And it would be inappropriate for senior people to speculate on any of it. It will come in due course, and I think we're all anxious to see the results of this.
And General DeLong, does General Hagee have any direct role or authority in the investigation?
So the way investigations work is there's the general over there that's running this, whether it's General Abizaid or General Casey. They either will assign an investigating officer, as General Hoare said, or they will allow the specific service to run this themselves. And I don't know how they're doing this, but what happens is normally they'll hold, if these people are found guilty, if that's the case, they'll have an Article 32 investigation, which will in fact determine whether they should go to court-martial. And if that in fact happens, then they usually give it to the service to run the court-martial. And then General Hagee would be responsible for the people who would be running the court-martial for these individuals.
I see. So even though the Navy is doing one of these investigations and the Army another, that it could ultimately end up with General Hagee. Let me stay with you, General DeLong. Marines that I know are a very tight group and talk to each other a lot, even after retirement. What was the reaction? What is the reaction to Marines and former Marines you know about this whole Haditha controversy?
Well, I think General Hagee said it best. Marines are held to a high standard, and if they violate those high standards, if they did, there's accountability. And I've done many of these investigations myself. In fact, I did the Aviano investigation. They're not pleasant. They're especially not pleasant when you're looking at things that your fellow Marines may or may not have done.
And General Hoare, is there concern? Are you concerned? Have you heard concern that even though these allegations are unproven and untested, that it is damaging, it has damaged the Marine Corps and its reputation?
Margaret, we're engaged in a war of ideas. And so when something like this is first uncovered and appears in the press and is discussed, and then pictures show up, I believe probably on Arab television, but I'm not sure, there's already been enormous damage done, regardless of the outcome of the investigations, because many people around the world will go away with the idea that this has been another terrible catastrophe visited on the Iraqi people.
Even before there's an official outcome.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you now, let's turn to Iraq, the subject of the evening. What is your assessment of how things are going militarily in Iraq?
Well, I would say, first of all, that there's no military solution to this problem. This is essentially a political problem. And to the degree that the Iraqis can work through with our help and find political means, vehicles, methods of doing business, some of this discomfort is going to go away. But until that happens, the amount of violence, in my judgment, is going to increase.
General DeLong, do you think the U.S. is on a path here that the Iraqis will pretty soon be able to take care of their own security and the U.S. can withdraw its forces?
Well, I agree with General Hoare. There's not a military solution to this. There's 18 provinces in Iraq. 14 of them are doing pretty well with our help and the coalition's help. There's 4 provinces, which, by the way, are the 4 largest, that are having these issues. And it is a political solution. I say, given where we are today, whether it's the right way that we got to where we are, that there's been free elections, that there's a parliament, there's a president, prime minister, is a great thing. The issue is, will these 3 groups get together and work?
Okay.
I hope so.
So let me just interrupt you. If you were CENTCOM commander today, and the Secretary of Defense or the President were to say, what could we do differently now? What would you say? What would you advise? Is there anything you'd correct in the way the U.S., and particularly the U.S. military, is going about this?
No, it's a political solution. And given where we are today, the hope is that this current government and parliament will get these 3 groups together and come up with some sort of a political solution and security for the country that'll make this work.
General Hoare, would you advise either beefing up American troops at this point, or, as Congressman Murtha has suggested, get ready for a fairly rapid withdrawal?
I think that we must stay. I think that the gravity of this situation, should we pull out prematurely, will further disrupt all of the Middle East. The end result could mean an Iraqi government that is dominated by Shia political entities and closely aligned with Iran. And I know from my own experience in my travels in that part of the country, all of the neighbors, many of which have large Shia populations, are very concerned about this.
But do you think that the current effort is essentially winnable in American terms?
I think we are at a tipping point right now. We are, what, 5 months since the last elections? We still don't have a unity government formed. We are unable to come up with a Minister of Defense and a Minister of Interior. And this continued assassinations in the large cities, Basra, which was thought to be very much under control, and pretty much pro-American, or at least I should say pro-coalition, to give the United Kingdom forces their due. But that seems to be slipping into chaos. I think it's a very serious situation.
General DeLong, let me go back to this troop level issue. Either increase the number of troops because they're overstretched and overstressed, or start getting ready for a withdrawal. Would you advocate either of those?
No, whatever the generals there know what the right number is, and to say that they're overstressed or overstressed, I haven't been there in the last 8 or 9 months, but I've been there 9 times in the previous 18 months and talked to the troops. I've never seen morale like they've had before. So, hell, I'm stressed. I'm sure General Hoare is stressed. You're stressed.
We're all
talking to us. But I just don't think it's as bad as that people are making it out. The media is a concern to me. These young men over there, they may have done something, but let's wait to find out what did happen before we indict them or pat them on the back.
General Hoare, do you think the situation now is already in the state of civil war? You talked about the tipping point. Do you think it's incipient civil war unless something is done? How would you characterize it?
I think we're very close to civil war. And as Mike suggests, this is not widespread throughout the country, but it is very much concentrated in those provinces where you have a large Sunni population. And this is really the nexus of this fight is between Sunnis and Shia.
So are you both saying, I'll start with you, General Hoare, that the U.S. should be prepared to stay indefinitely?
No, I don't think we can stay indefinitely. I think the effort that has been made to train up Iraqi forces has not moved as quickly as it should. And I'm told that it's understaffed and underfunded again. I don't know that, but I've read that recently. But that's the key. And there has to be so much more done than just train battalions. We need to build combat support structures so they have logistic support, medical support. They need to have appropriate equipment, all of those things.
And General DeLong, if that day never comes, I mean, if we've been talking about training the Iraqi troops now for 3 years, what does the United States do? I mean, do we stay indefinitely, or is there a point at which the U.S. should ever say, well, the Iraqis may not be ready, but it's time to go?
Well, I don't think the U.S. public or the U.S. political system will allow us to stay indefinitely. But we need to stay until, as General Hoare said, that the country is secure both internally and externally. And I've brought this up before. The countries surrounding Iraq it's not to their benefit that there be a large democratic country in their midst. You've got probably 50,000, and that's the number I've heard, Iranians in the south that are trying to keep this government from forming, and you have probably 20,000 Syrians trying to do the same thing. So we need to get help from these surrounding countries if we want the inside political system to work, in my view.
All right, General Michael DeLong, General Joseph Hoare, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Coming up, debating the estate tax and fining indecency. But first, part 2 of our science series on the way business is tackling the question of global warming. Our economics correspondent Paul Salman has that story.
A dairy farm in mid-Minnesota. 900 contented cows. Over 6,000 gallons of milk a day. And sadly, about 20,000 tons a year of a dairy farm's foremost, or should we say hindmost, byproduct, manure.
That cover is being held up by the gas that's being generated.
Farmer Dennis Haubenschild has invested nearly $500,000 in an anaerobic digester in which bacteria deconstruct his dung heap into first-rate fertilizer and a familiar aromatic gas made up mainly of methane.
So this is a sort of a little canopy of flatulence.
That's another way of looking at it, I guess, yes.
More noxious than this very natural gas's odor, it turns out, is its effect. The effect of its main ingredient, methane, on global warming. Once in the atmosphere, methane, a greenhouse gas like carbon dioxide, lets sunlight through to the Earth, but traps some of the heat reflected back towards space, warming the Earth like a greenhouse. Carbon dioxide, mainly from the burning of fossil fuels, accounts for some 80% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Methane from cows, farms, landfills, and coal mines accounts for only 10% or so. But pound for pound, raw methane is 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a heat blanket. So Haubenschild captures as much methane as he can, then burns it to run a Caterpillar engine that in turn helps power his farm. With some billion head of cattle worldwide, the conversion of even a fraction of their dairy air, if you'll pardon the expression, relieves the atmosphere. Farm witticisms at an end, let's move to the economics. How do you get farmers to convert?
The farmer now has a new business model.
Give them a financial incentive, says Richard Sandor, founder of the Chicago Climate Exchange, where Haubenschild himself now makes money by selling credits for putting less greenhouse gas into the atmosphere.
He made $5,000 or $10,000 from this trade. That may not sound like a lot to you, but the average dairy farmer in this state makes $55,000 to $60,000. So we have a new business model for Minnesota dairymen. Okay?
Richard Sandor, Ph.D. in economics from the University of Minnesota, was back at his alma mater recently touting his latest venture. Father of the interest rate futures market, Sandor has applied the market concept to global warming. His model? The market for that environmental scourge of the 1980s, acid rain.
Perhaps the most depressing news about acid rain is that for parts of the environment, it may already be too late.
Worried sick about acid rain? Not anymore. Largely because of the Clean Air Act's cap-and-trade system for sulfur dioxide, SO2. Sulfur-spewing electricity plants were forced to cap, that is, limit their emissions, and then continuously lower them. If they went over their cap, they had to buy credits from those who had come in under, and had sulfur credits to burn, if you will, to sell. Thus, the market incentive to come up with sulfur-slashing technology. The results? The cap-and-trade market system has cut air sulfur levels in half without raising electricity rates, adjusted for inflation.
We took that program and we said, okay, there's a great program. That's dog hunt. And let's try to do what we did with financial instruments and SO2 and try to apply it to carbon.
One slight problem with cap-and-trade for global warming, however, is that in the U.S., there's no cap. No legal limit on greenhouse gas emissions. We haven't even signed the global Kyoto Protocol and its cap-and-trade system. That's because Kyoto could have cost the U.S. $400 billion a year and 5 million jobs, says President Bush's environment czar, James Connaughton.
We do not want to put Americans out of work for the sake of an economically damaging set of climate strategies. The cheaper choice for an investor will be to move your investment in energy-intensive activities to another country. When that happens, the jobs go, the economic investment and growth goes, the air pollution and greenhouse gases go back up into the atmosphere.
Russell Train, though, environment czar back when Richard Nixon was president, is among the many who thinks cap-and-trade could create jobs here.
I think it become an economic plus. New technologies,
demand, the demand for this kind of thing is going to be enormous.
Richard Sandor's Chicago Climate Exchange is trying to spur such innovation. It's signed up 150 participants so far, willing to voluntarily cap and lower their emissions. Ford, IBM, Motorola, Dow Corning, DuPont, International Paper, even American Electric Power, the largest coal-burning utility in the Western Hemisphere, is on board, giving incentives to those who can sell credits. Sounds great, but we wondered, why in the world, if I were a company, would I voluntarily sign up to cut my carbon emissions if I didn't have to?
If you're not at the table negotiating, you're going to be on the menu, okay? And I think that it was very important for people to understand or believe that they had better be involved in crafting the rules and regulations so that they would be consistent with commercial logic in achieving a social goal.
In other words, these firms believe they're simply getting a head start on the inevitable by pledging to cut a certain amount of greenhouse gases by a certain date. If they miss, they buy credits from entrepreneurs who lower emissions, say Farmer Haubenschild.
It's up to $3.65 today per ton per carbon credit.
That's $3.65 per metric ton of carbon dioxide. And remember, methane is nearly 20 times more valuable. So, cold hard cash for hot steaming cow pies to not release their biogas into thin air, but get recycled instead into fertilizer and energy.
Every 100 cows produces enough energy per day equal to a barrel of oil. So we're basically here with 900 cows, we're producing equivalent to 9 barrels of crude oil a day.
But are his numbers for real? How much energy does he use to make the methane, for example? It's how much extra energy he produces that matters. Crucial to the climate exchange, then, auditors like Ed Heslop.
What we do is we try to measure how much gas comes off and thus turn it to a monetary instrument that can then bring some value back to the farm to help justify the large capital investment that went into the digester system that Dennis put in and the electrical engines and so on.
Or, as Richard Sandor says of any firm that advertises its greenness,
where is the audit? Who has checked these numbers? Who has verified?
That's the issue at the University of Minnesota, which has also joined the climate exchange, hoping to make a few bucks. Its windmills replace fossil fuel use, though it takes some energy to make and maintain them. More problematic, the biofuels used for transportation. Dean Robert Elby.
10% of the university's vehicles are now E85 or flex fuel vehicles.
That is, they run mainly on ethanol, made in this country mostly from corn. But whether that move earns the university credits on the climate exchange is still being argued. Because at the moment, it takes almost as much energy to make the ethanol from corn as the energy you get from the ethanol. More dramatic would be to switch from Old King coal, the dirty old fuel currently powering the Minneapolis campus, to waste biomass just down the river at General Mills. Oat hulls, what's left over when you make Cheerios and its sister cereals. Hardly any fuel used to get these guys ready to burn. Little energy in, lots out.
So the hulls of oats are a very good form of biomass.
And you're hoping that if you take this and just may I?
Yeah, sure.
Just dump it, you're going to get credit from the Chicago Climate Exchange for doing this.
That's right, for displacing the coal, for adding it to the mixture and displacing the coal.
On the exchange, you can get credit for lots of ways to eliminate carbon. Sop it up in a newly planted forest, a restored prairie, or some newfangled form of pollution control. But the price for credits has to be high enough to cover your costs. Right now, it's been hovering around $3.50 a ton, because the system's voluntary market demand for credits is relatively low.
If the United States developed its own cap-and-trade system under the Kyoto style, it would make everybody's life easier. We'd reduce global warming, we'd reduce the emissions, we'd be able to get a more active marketplace that would provide true financial incentives for people to do right.
At the moment, Dennis Haubenschild is barely breaking even. It costs too much to shovel move the manure.
pay for the pump that gets it all in under the tent, that is. The tractors that take the finished fertilizer out to the fields. But this is a guy who recycles all of his plastic, runs an experimental fuel cell on derriere, ferments entire corn plants for cow feed. He believes we have to recycle our carbon and methane, or life itself will be impossible.
The footprint that we're leaving on this earth, the average United States citizen, has got to be lessened if we're going to maintain any type of sustainability at all. I feel that this has got to be done, and I've got to show that it can be done.
The Chicago Climate Exchange, Haubin Shields and others are coming to believe might be one way to do it. More so if the U.S. government gets involved.
Ray Suarez has our look at the battle over whether the estate tax should be repealed.
Members of the families that own Walmart, make Snickers candy bars, and make Gallo wine have been paying close attention. Maybe your family hasn't been watching the Senate heat up over repealing the estate tax.
Let's call this $1 trillion giveaway what it is. This is the Paris Hilton tax break. It's about giving billions and billions of dollars to billionaire heirs and heiresses at a time when American taxpayers can't afford it.
The debate is simple. Should the largest estates in this country be taxed when they're passed on to heirs? Under the current law, only people with a net worth of at least $2 million are taxed, or about 12,000 estates this year. Today, the Senate began debate on cutting or possibly repealing the estate tax altogether. Advocates of repeal, like Senator John Cornyn of Texas, often refer to it as the death tax.
Once you earn income and pay taxes on your income, then Uncle Sam comes along when your loved one is lying on their deathbed and says, we want another bite.
Senator Cornyn said the tax was unfair, hurts American businesses, and breaks up ranches and farms.
Some advocate keeping the death tax in the IRS code as the key to opening the door of fiscal discipline. I disagree. Following this path will lead to nowhere, and lead there fast. What it will do instead is to slam the door on ranchers and farmers and family-owned businesses, and that's not something that I'm prepared to do.
Many Democrats argued that at a time of war, inflation, and a growing budget deficit, the country can't afford to give a tax break to a small number of wealthy families. Senator Kent Conrad of North Dakota.
Are we really going to take on $1 trillion of additional debt in order to help a handful of very wealthy people who really don't need the help?
The vote to continue debate tomorrow is expected to be very close. If Congress does not act, the threshold for qualifying for the tax will rise, next time to $3.5 million for an estate, before phasing out entirely for the year 2010, then going back to its old pre-2002 rates in 2011. For more on the debate over taxing estates, I'm joined by William Beach, who oversees data analysis for the Heritage Foundation, a conservative policy research organization in Washington. The group's work has often been cited in this fight, and William Gates Sr., a prominent Seattle lawyer and father of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft. Very briefly, Mr. Beach, give me your best argument for repealing this tax.
Well, I'll try to keep the numbers out of this. This is how I make my living. We think the central argument against the estate tax is a moral argument. The argument it goes like this. People work hard all their lives. They succeed. They save their money. They play by the rules. They put aside the funds to build a business and to build assets for the next generation. And then, late in their lives, usually, sometime in their 50s, they're visited by an accountant who says, do you know about the federal estate tax? And they say, no, what is this? And it's the nightmare of the American dream. Suddenly they are put in a position of buying insurance policies or doing a number of things to try to save those assets. Now, many succeed, Ray. There's no question about that. But many don't. And when you go outside the Beltway and you ask people, is this fair? Is this the kind of tax system that you want? They'll say, we want wealthy people to pay their share. But we don't want to have something in the tax code that signals that if you work hard, live by the rules, you're going to be punished.
And Mr. Gates, could you give me your strongest argument for retaining this tax?
Yeah, let's take the example of the intelligent, hardworking, ambitious human being who tries very hard to accumulate net worth. Except let's just move him from Chicago, Illinois to somewhere in Ghana. Huh? So, how much of an estate is this intelligent, hardworking person going to create? Very, very little. Wealthy? No way. The difference, of course, being that Ghana and the United States are quite different places. In this country, we have this orderly system where one can expect the rules tomorrow to be the same as they are today, and what's most important, we have a government which is contributing to the economy at the rate of about $90 billion a year. All this new technology, which makes it possible for our hypothetical, intelligent, hardworking person to become wealthy and live a very, very comfortable life. Our point in suggesting that this tax makes sense is that at the end of that wonderful, comfortable life, it's entirely appropriate for society to collect back some of what it has contributed to that human being's welfare. And it is, after all, a tax on his heirs. It's not a tax on this marvelous person that Mr. Beach hypothesizes.
Because, Mr. Beach, that marvelous person is now dead. But Mr. Gates' central point, I think you understand very well, that the government was a partner in a person being able to become and protect their wealth.
There's no dispute. But that partnership is an everyday affair. Every day the government provides me roads to get to work, and schools for my children, and all the kinds of infrastructure which makes the American life a better life than the life in Ghana. And that's the reason we have an income tax rate. We, in fact, tax individuals, if one hadn't noticed, who have high incomes at higher rates. And in this country, those people who are especially wealthy pay an especially large percentage of the taxes. They're doing that all the time. That is their payback, and it's on a daily basis, a yearly basis, to the government for their partnership. What we're saying here is that a tax that raises about 1.5% of federal revenues, that even people on the far left have said is not achieving its goals of redistributing income and breaking up great fortunes, and in fact is the most feared tax of black Americans and the most feared tax among women entrepreneurs. That tax, which has all of the taints of bad early 20th century tax policy, should be retired. Let's get on to fundamental tax reform. Let's get on to the big issues of how we redesign the tax code to achieve the social objectives that Mr. Gates is looking for, but let's make sure that we don't carry along baggage that has failed to meet its objectives and is no longer, in fact, perhaps even counterproductive to the growth of the economy and the strength of the society that we have around us.
Mr. Gates, you heard Mr. Beach call it the most feared tax, but is it one that very many people are likely to pay?
No, as a matter of fact, it's most feared because 18 of the wealthiest families in this country have spent a ton of money getting across the idea that it's a tax that everybody ought to be worried about. And your question goes right to the point, Ray. I think under the current rules for exemption, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/2% of the people who die each year are involved in the estate tax. As we get out to 2009, when the exemption goes up a little further, which even those of us who feel the tax should be left in place would encourage some increasing in the exemption, 0.3% of all the people who die are involved in paying this tax. It's a wonderfully progressive tax, and it's a tax which 99.7% of the people in this country don't even have to give a thought to.
But does the fact that the pool captured by that tax is a small one buttress your argument for its fairness? Just because it's very few people paying for it, does that make it any more fair?
Well, you know, as time goes along, the collections from this tax are going to increase enormously because of the enormous increase in the net worth of Americans, the richest Americans. And I would suggest that Mr. Beach is correct when he says that the estate tax has not prevented our country becoming very top-heavy in terms of the distribution of wealth. It has diminished it, because if the tax weren't there, then all of those wealthy people would be just that much more wealthy. But it nevertheless
has not prevented that unfortunate occurrence. But the fact of the matter is it's going to be a larger and larger contribution to federal revenues, and we haven't even discussed the fact that our country is in a deep fiscal crisis. Our country is committed to paying Social Security and Medicare payments, which nobody knows where the money is going to come from. It's clear that we're on our way to bankruptcy, and in the midst of that, with levees to build in New Orleans, with a war to fight in Iraq, somebody is suggesting that we should take away a tax which over even the earliest 10 years is going to generate somewhere over $500 billion in revenue for the American economy, for the American Treasury.
William Beach, can this tax be cut without wreaking fiscal havoc?
Well, yes, it can. I mean, the effects of this tax will go directly into the center part of the economy and boost economic activity. We think that we will see more income and we will see more taxable income as a consequence. But Ray, I want to directly challenge the point that this is a tax only paid by 3-4% of the population. Remember, these are business owners. And for all of the estates that are taxed, there are workers, there are little league teams, there are all this infrastructure of people who will never pay the tax, but who could lose their job, who could lose the support of wealthy people. And that's why when you go outside of the Beltway, when you take off the green eye shades, when you stop talking to the people who are in the top 1% of the wealthiest people, people of ordinary lives understand that this tax affects them because it affects their jobs, it affects their community, it affects their future, whether they should start a business or not. And that's why we get the kinds of margins, us repealers, in the polls where 60 to 70% of the people consistently say, okay, fine, wealthy people need to pay their fair share, but this is not the tax to do it.
Are businesses being broken up, William Gates, in order to pay this tax, as Mr. Beach suggests?
This whole business of the family business being threatened by this is just such a huge exaggeration. I mean, the number of estates, we know what the contents of estates are, and the number of estates where there is a significant holding of a family-owned business are, down in the single digits in most states. In my own state, there's something like 3 of them, and those cases have, people have not had to sell their business. This tax has been here for almost 100 years, and I don't think there's any suggestion that our economy has somehow been deteriorated because of the wages being lower on account of somebody worrying about paying the estate tax 20 years from now. I just don't think that's a realistic analysis of the facts of life in this country.
And the debate is going to continue in the Senate. Gentlemen, William H. Gates, William Beach, thank you both.
Finally tonight, paying a price for crossing a line on the air. Jeffrey Brown has a media unit look.
The price of so-called indecency broadcast over the airwaves is getting a lot more expensive. Today, the House of Representatives is authorizing the Federal Communications Commission to fine over-the-air television and radio broadcasters up to $325,000 for violating decency standards. That's a tenfold increase over previous penalties. The Senate passed the bill last month, and President Bush is expected to sign the measure. The episode that launched this congressional action was the now infamous Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction at the 2004 Super Bowl, which was broadcast by CBS. The new fines will not apply to satellite or cable stations that are often available side by side the over-the-air networks on most cable and direct satellite services. The FCC only has jurisdiction over the traditional broadcasters. And joining me to discuss the new law is Jeremy Polofsky, who covers telecommunication and media policy for Reuters. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
First, what programming and what hours are covered by this?
Well, it's only, as you said, over-the-air programming. It's your broadcast channels, your Fox, NBC, CBS, and ABC, PBS, and those sort of that you receive over your general TV without any antenna, or with an antenna, no cable or satellite. It only applies between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. that you cannot broadcast indecent content. Obscene content is banned all the time off of over the air.
So the main thing here, the new thing here, is the size of the fines, and it clearly intended as a deterrent.
Correct. And there's some who would question whether it would actually act as a sufficient deterrent, because the networks and some of the bigger broadcast stations earn millions of dollars in quarterly profits.
Well, how does the process work here? The fines could be levied against both networks and their the local stations, including some small stations.
Sort of. The networks some of the networks own TV stations themselves. So the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, cannot, which is charged with enforcing these regulations, cannot go after the networks themselves, but only the stations, whether it's radio or TV. And so a complaint would come into the FCC from someone in the public. Anyone can file a complaint at the agency, and the agency would review it, potentially send out a letter of inquiry, review the facts of the case, and then make a decision.
Have there been, in fact, more complaints in the last few years?
Well, ever since the Janet Jackson episode, they certainly have skyrocketed, but there has been some analysis out there that shows that most of these complaints are coming through email-generated systems from parents groups like the Parents Television Council and the Christian Coalition.
Are they, in fact, I mean, who is pushing this? We keep talking about the Janet Jackson incident. What then happened? Was it Congress? Was it the FCC? Was it outside groups like the ones you mentioned?
Well, it's a little bit of all of that. There was a tremendous outrage registered after the Janet Jackson incident, but the fines legislation, there was fines legislation prior to that incident. It just did not get very much traction. So the Janet Jackson incident absolutely pushed it ahead and really put a lot of steam behind it to move it forward. Now, it's taken a couple years to get there, and it's a much narrower bill than originally had been crafted, but it's still, through the work of the parents groups, some of the lawmakers, and despite heavy lobbying by the broadcasters and the networks against it, it ended up going through.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. What was their argument, the broadcasters and the networks?
Well, they say, CBS apologized for the Janet Jackson episode, said they didn't know about it. The other broadcasters along with them said that they would clean up their act. They would, some of them have included tape delay now. They say, we can fix this problem. We don't need government regulation. But if you do decide to keep regulating us or make it harsher, you should incorporate cable and satellite services that are out there.
Now, that was not in here. That is still not in here, in spite of some in the House wanting to go that route, correct?
Right. Well, there were some in Congress that definitely wanted to consider that route because some Americans today do not differentiate, with the proliferation of all these channels on cable and satellite, do not differentiate between broadcast over the air and cable and satellite. So the concern was, well, consumers don't understand it, then do they really know, should these protections be expanded? And that's
No, and speaking of understanding it, the other thing that's not in the bill is in any definition of indecency, correct?
That is correct.
That is still left to the FCC and the courts?
Yes, it is. And that is something that the FCC says, look, the standard has been clear. The FCC chairman, Kevin Martin, said in April to a convention of broadcasters, look, it's been out there for 20 plus years. You guys know what the words are. You know what the lines are. There shouldn't be any problem here. And the broadcasters say, well, hang on. There are a lot of different conflicting decisions that you have made. We don't really feel that you have sufficiently told us where those lines are.
And some of these cases do end up in court.
Yes, we're going to probably see a court battle in the coming months. There were several cases that were handed down by the FCC earlier this year. The broadcast stations and the networks have gone to court to challenge some of them.
All right, Jeremy Polofsky of Reuters. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
A Again, the other major developments of the day, the U.S. Marine Corps Commandant acknowledged he's gravely concerned by reports of atrocities in Iraq, and the Senate rejected a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Gwen Eiffel. Thank you, and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer has been provided by...
You've worked hard over the years creating a good life for yourself and for your family. At Pacific Life, we understand the importance of building a legacy that will stand the test of time. For over 135 years, Pacific Life has provided millions of Americans with the power of choice, a wide array of solutions to help them meet their financial and estate planning goals. Pacific Life, the power to help you succeed.
At CIT, we provide the financing to keep healthcare strong and healthy. We help energy companies find new resources. We work with communications companies to make the world smaller and life bigger. We offer financial aid to make college possible for more students. At CIT, we help finance the future.
They're expected for the most part. Again, maybe a touch of drizzle, some light rain tomorrow, but most of us will probably be dry. And for the grand floral parade on Saturday, partly cloudy skies morning and afternoon, a high of 76, and Sunday looks pretty nice too. Hallelujah. How about that?
Sounds great. Thanks, Rod.
See you tomorrow, folks.
Good night.
Key Home Furnishings and Flex Steel Furniture bring you comfort and style through quality leathers and expert craftsmanship. And right now at Key Home Furnishings, this butter soft leather sofa is on sale for just $12.99 for a limited time. Hurry in now to Key Home Furnishings.
The deep sleep of a Sleep Number bed. It's a state somewhere between reverie and a spell. Science calls it REM sleep, but it's really enchantment. Almost 90% of people get more REM sleep using a Sleep Number bed, because each side adjusts to give you your own firmness level. So get a number, and then have yourself some enchanted evening. Where will your Sleep Number take you tonight? Find it at your local Select Comfort store.
Lottery profits help prepare and improve all 230 Oregon state parks, including Silver Falls.
They help strengthen young minds.
And bodies by supporting K through 12 public education.
They help train the workforce that attracted Royal Caribbean Cruises and 1,000 jobs to Springfield.
And they help children learn while playing at A.C. Gilbert's Discovery Village in Salem.
These are just a few of the thousands of projects funded by lottery profits. The Oregon Lottery. It does good things.
Lottery games are based on chance and should be played for entertainment only.
Columbia Credit Union's Year of the Member. What is it? Is it professional, local people taking care of you and your home loan every step of the way, even through closing? Sure. But isn't it also dragon boat jousting on Main Street? Awesome. Open to anyone who lives or works in Southwest Washington.
Gathering dining sets are the new choice for casual dining. A taller table matched with bar stools provides a more relaxed comfort. And right now at Key Home Furnishings, our most popular set is on sale for just $7.99 for a limited time. Hurry in now to Key Home Furnishings.
K2 News, voted Oregon's best investigative journalism.